In the early hours of a quiet summer morning, residents of a North London neighbourhood were jolted awake by a deafening explosion. Some described it as feeling like a small earthquake. Windows rattled. Buildings shook. Confused neighbors rushed outside, trying to understand what had just happened. At first, many feared it was a gas accident. But what investigators would uncover inside the destroyed home revealed something far more horrifying. This wasn't an accident. It was the final chapter of a relationship that had been collapsing behind closed doors for years. And at the center of it all was a man prosecutors would later describe as consumed by anger. A man who, according to the evidence presented in court, killed the woman he claimed to love before attempting to destroy everything around him. This is the tragic case of Annabel Rook. Before we begin, if you enjoy well-researched true crime stories that focus on the facts behind the headlines, make sure you're subscribed and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Now let's dive into the story. For more than a decade, Annabel Rook and Clifton George shared a life together. To outsiders, they appeared to be a long-term couple raising a family under one roof. But according to evidence later presented in court, the reality was far different. Friends, family members, messages, and personal notes would paint a picture of a relationship under enormous strain. By the summer of 2025, that strain had reportedly reached a breaking point. The court heard that Annabel had repeatedly expressed a desire to leave the relationship. She had allegedly told George that he needed to move out. What had once been a partnership was now moving toward separation. And according to prosecutors, George was not willing to accept that reality. Annabel was known by many as a caring and compassionate woman. She had helped establish a social enterprise dedicated to supporting women who had experienced trauma and abuse. Those who knew her described someone committed to helping others rebuild their lives during difficult times. Yet while she worked to support vulnerable people, evidence suggested she was facing serious difficulties in her own relationship. Then came the night that changed everything. During the evening of June 16 and the early hours of June 17, prosecutors say an argument erupted inside the family home. Arguments are common in failing relationships. But this one would end in unimaginable tragedy. According to the prosecution, George became violent during the confrontation. Jurors heard allegations that he punched Annabel and attempted to strangle her. Then, according to the case presented in court, he walked into the kitchen. What happened next would become one of the most important details during the trial. Instead of leaving the confrontation behind, prosecutors said George retrieved a knife. He then returned and continued the attack. Annabel suffered multiple stab wounds. By the time the violence ended, her life had been taken inside the very place where she should have been safest, her own home. But the horror was not over. Investigators say George then began carrying out a disturbing plan. A plan that would place neighboring families at risk and transform a murder scene into a disaster zone. Evidence presented during the trial revealed that George allegedly started a fire using paper from the kitchen. He then carried the flames to an area of the house where a propane gas canister was located. What followed was catastrophic. A massive explosion ripped through the property. Photographs later shown in court revealed extensive destruction. Parts of the home were devastated. Ceilings collapsed. Floorboards were torn apart. Furniture was thrown from its original position. The force of the blast left significant damage throughout the building. For neighbors sleeping nearby, the explosion came without warning. One moment everything was quiet. The next, an enormous boom shattered the silence. Several residents later described being abruptly awakened by the powerful blast. Emergency crews rushed to the scene, expecting to confront the aftermath of a major explosion. What they found instead was something even more disturbing. George was discovered outside in the garden. He was reportedly bleeding heavily. According to evidence presented in court, he was attempting to harm himself using a shard of broken glass. As first responders worked through the chaos, George informed them that his partner was still inside the house. Then came the statement that would immediately change the direction of the investigation. When emergency personnel asked how he knew she was dead, he reportedly answered with chilling simplicity. "Because I killed her." Those words would become one of the most shocking moments connected to the case. Inside the damaged property, investigators discovered Annabel's body. What initially appeared to some as a possible gas explosion was quickly recognized as something far more sinister. This was a homicide investigation. As detectives worked to reconstruct the events of that night, they uncovered evidence that prosecutors argued demonstrated intent. The Crown Prosecution Service later stated that George attempted to portray his actions as a loss of control. However, prosecutors emphasized a key detail. After the initial assault, he allegedly left the scene of the attack, retrieved a weapon, and returned. That sequence became central to the murder case presented before the jury. During police interviews, George reportedly claimed that he had lost it after discovering information he believed had been hidden from him. But prosecutors argued that anger was not a legal justification for murder. Over the course of the trial, jurors heard testimony about the deteriorating relationship. They learned about tensions that had reportedly built over time. Messages and notes recovered during the investigation helped provide insight into what was happening behind closed doors during the final months of Annabel's life. The prosecution painted a picture of a relationship moving steadily toward collapse. A woman attempting to move on. And a man unwilling to accept that decision. As evidence accumulated, jurors were asked to determine whether the killing amounted to murder. After hearing the case, they reached their conclusion. Clifton George was found guilty of murdering Annabel Rook. For Annabel's loved ones, the verdict represented a measure of accountability. But it could never undo the loss they suffered. The Crown Prosecution Service later reflected on the tragedy, highlighting Annabel's dedication to helping vulnerable women and describing the devastating reality that her life had been taken by someone she should have been able to trust. The case serves as a reminder that some of the most dangerous situations do not begin with strangers. Sometimes they develop quietly behind closed doors, hidden beneath the appearance of an ordinary life. And sometimes the warning signs only become fully visible after it is far too late. A mother. A daughter. A friend. A woman who spent years helping others. Her story ended in violence, but for those who knew her, that is not how she will be remembered. She will be remembered for the lives she touched, the people she helped, and the legacy she leaves behind. As for Clifton George, he now awaits sentencing following his conviction for murder. And while the explosion may have shaken an entire neighborhood, it was the events that happened before that blast that truly shocked the nation. Thank you for watching. If you found this case informative, leave your thoughts respectfully in the comments below. Remember that real families continue to live with the consequences of tragedies like this. Subscribe for more in-depth true crime stories, and we'll see you in the next video.